Hello and welcome back to the Cloister. In today's episode, the fifth in our Lenten series, Simon Sleeman, a monk at Glenstal Abbey, reflects on the passage found in John 12:20-33, unless the wheat grain dies. I pray that these Lenten reflections continue to be a blessing to you in your walk with the Lord.
Yeah, when I was considering this, I didn't realize it was St. Patrick's Day. The gospel that you'll realize the gospel this morning was all about the wheat grain dying. And I've been thinking about this wheat grain now for weeks and asking myself, what could this possibly mean? That passage of the gospel, it begins with, there were some Greeks in town. And then they wanted to see Jesus, and Philip and Andrew, they sent them to get Jesus. Can you talk to us? And there was a flat no. When he said, no, my hour has come. And in the Gospel of John, we're right now in the bang center of the Gospel. Absolutely the center, the pivot point. And his message is, he didn't say that. He said, my hour has come. Up to this, it's been, my hour hasn't come. I was leisurely and hanging out. And suddenly there's this urgency, my hour has come. And then he goes on about the wheat grain. Unless the wheat grain dies, it will not bring forth fruit. And then it says, if you want to gain your life, you have to lose it. If you want, and I was just thinking of all these messages like deny yourself, take up your cross, you're going to, it's a very hard sell, denying, dying, taking up your cross. Dear goodness, it's not an easy one. And that this is all linked with glory. Somehow you're meant to find glory in all this, which again is a hard sell, that you could somehow by dying you'll find glory. So the reason for the peanuts is that I said, okay, I'm going to actually do an experiment about this wheat grain dying. Now, I didn't have any wheat grains, but I knew I had acorns. I got acorns. And I got my acorn. And this will tell you, when I got this assignment, this is this acorn. At this stage, it's now this size, my little oak. And there's a lovely history to this because I have a great uncle who was killed at the back of a Lancaster bomber. He was the gunner. And you'd no chance if you were the gunner in a Lancaster bomber. So my mother went to see his grave, which is in Wilpe in Holland. And it was an oak tree. And there were acorns. And she brought them back. She planted them in Clonakilty in her house. And last autumn, I found this acorn. So I brought them back, planted them. So that's the acorn. And I tried another one then to see if it would be growing for this time. But the startling thing, the truth is that the acorn doesn't die. The acorn doesn't die. No more than the peanut dies when you plant it. So this was an astounding fact. I was really startled by this. But I come back to it. First of all, death, glory. For us, death has become, we've become phobic about death. We don't talk about death anymore. We barely know how to grieve anymore. Someone talks about the 20th century as being the tearless century. The tearless century. We do everything to put it off medically. We defer it, we delay it, and we emotionally avoid it increasingly. I think it's something that strikes me more and more, that our emotional bandwidth, the emotions we're allowed to experience, is getting narrower and narrower and narrower. I think that's true, and I think we're becoming less human because of it. And grief is one of the things that I think we've lost that capacity that our forebears had in much greater abundance than we have. We use euphemisms to talk about death, the passing over, blah, blah, blah. So I think the problem is that I think we regard life as a possession rather than a gift. We sort of own it, we think. And therefore, if we lose it, it becomes a tragedy. It becomes a tragic thing to lose your thing. There was a time, and you'll all know it, that we used to talk, people would talk about preparing for a good death. That was what people did, to die well. I remember Father Placid of our own community died last year, was it? But he was 102. But he constantly talked, when he was much younger, about preparing for a good death.
He said to live a good life and die holy death.
Good death, yeah, but preparing for it. How do we prepare to finish? How do we prepare to finish? We don't really talk about it anymore. There's a blurring of our mortality. I think technology and the comfort we live in now, we think, we should be able to put this off. It doesn't impinge in the same way. The only exception I have to, my mother's got, this is her second plug now, and I'll have to stop, but she's one of the people who talks a lot about death. Now, she's in a nursing home where she went in to die 3 years ago. She's doing a very bad job of what she went in for. We keep telling her, listen, you're failing miserably. But at least 20, 25 years ago, she was getting her kitchen table renewed, the top of it. And there was a nice carpenter there, and she said to him, listen, you're doing such a, is there any chance you make me a coffin? I think it was short. She's a good Scotswoman now, so she's very keen on them, holding the pennies together. But he said, fine, lie down on the ground and I'll measure you. And so she lay on the ground and he measured her, and he made the coffin. And the coffin has been up in her in the cupboard for the last 20 years, 25 more. I'd say 25 years. And I remember one day I had a nephew, and we went up to get some, something out of this room. And I opened the door, and he saw this coffin. And he said to me, what's that? I said, that's your grandmother's coffin. Oh, he said, I don't want my granny to die. Well, I said, that's what it is. That's your granny's coffin. So she is right on song about death. But the strange thing I think about death, as I was thinking about this, he said, even though we don't talk about it, we're obsessed by it. War, murders, all with the headlines. They're not nice things, but we at a distance, we're thinking. But the real crux of the matter for me is that we're being sold a way of life that's a way of death. We're being treated so badly by our culture. I really do believe that we are being treated badly, and we're being offered a way of death. Meaning, value, identity from stuff, possessions, prestige, power, and we see the results of it. We see the results of it everywhere. Obesity, addiction, anxiety. There's a crisis in how to live. A crisis. I think there's a famine in the land. A famine in the land. We're desold, increasingly desold, and the signs of it are everywhere. How is it that we know so much, can do so much, and still live badly, is the question someone put. It's a very good question. So I think we're being corralled into this very, treated like animals. And this is where the butterflies come in, because if you think about the butterfly starts off as an egg and hatches into a caterpillar. And what's a caterpillar do? Caterpillar's only function is to eat, consume. Think of that caterpillar. All his job is eating the cabbage, just eating and eating and eating. And the reason is because everything's eating insects. Insects lay hundreds and hundreds of eggs, and in each egg they put a tiny bit of food. Not like a hen's egg where they fill it up with food. In a butterfly's egg, they put a little bit of food, so it has to hatch into another stage to eat, to get more food so it can become a butterfly. The tough part is when it stops consuming. And what happens then? It liquefies and uses all the bits, all that food is stored up, to change into a butterfly. Into a butterfly. Now, I know for much of my life I've been a caterpillar. I've been harvesting, eating ideas and work. Work was my addiction. It can be food, chips, whatever you like. Addiction is what the caterpillar is. And if he could go on eating and eating and eating, he would. Why would you want to go through this dying to become a butterfly? I can tell you I put it off till I was very late in my life to stop. The caterpillar has to stop, liquefy, and fly. We are encouraged to behave as caterpillars and not change. There's nobody wants us to become butterflies, because then the economy will crash. We won't be buying. We won't be consuming. I think that's, for me, that's a very accurate reading of my situation, and for many. What I do know is that is where a lot of the dying takes place. I think if the caterpillar had a choice, it wouldn't liquefy and become a butterfly, because it's very, very challenging. So I think our culture has very little to offer us at the moment other than consuming. I don't see it. I don't see it. And where I've witnessed this most recently is my own family, as they all reach retirement age. Then they've been busy all their lives. But now what? Now what? None of them much believes in anything. Now what? What does our prosperity gospel offer to these people now? Oh yes, they can go on, play golf, whatever. But is there any meaning left? So that's my butterfly and my caterpillar. So what our culture is offering us is precisely the opposite of denying yourself, dying to yourself, taking up your cross. No way, Jose, am I going down that route. I mean, I'm here to enjoy myself. Life is about boosting my self-esteem. You know, it's cost me a fortune to put this self together. You know, all my education, my training, therapy. And now you want to tell me that I'm to die to this self? No. I'll stick to the self-help religion, where I'm in charge at least, and I get some satisfaction of doing something. Glory to man in the highest, someone said to me, and on earth a higher standard of living. So, God here can be if I have time, I can squeeze it in. Maybe not on the weekends, because that's busy time. But God is sort of a supplement, an add-on to my busy schedule. I've got a job to do. I've got family to feed. For goodness sake, what are you talking about? I have myself to maintain. So it's exactly the opposite of what we're talking about in wheat grains dying. And Satan whispers in the garden, you can do it. You can do it. You're great. You're good. You can do it. Fill your barns. Fill your barns. What are you, the rainy? Fill your barns. It may not be filling them with food, as in the gospel. Fill them with ideas. Fill them with facts. Fill them with whatever you like. Fill your barns. So back to our wheat grain, guys. Back to our wheat grain. A fact check, isn't that what they call it now? Well, a fact check. Well, a fact check, when I did it with the acorn and the peanuts that I have all over the place here, and I forgot to bring the one. If you split a peanut in half, a broad bean or a pea, or if you open an acorn, you will find inside a tiny miniature leaf and a tiny miniature root. Does that die? That doesn't die. That grows. That grows. So it's not literally true that the wheat grain dies. If the wheat grain died, then there'd be nothing. There would be nothing. So it's not literally true. It's not literally true. So what are we to make of this? What is Jesus doing? It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor. Now, a metaphor is literally a lie. God is a rock. Well, God is not a rock. I mean, you don't go out to the local quarry and get a rock and put it in the ground and say, this is God. Don't do a course in geology to study about God. God isn't a rock. It's a lie. I am the vine. You're not a vine. It's a lie. It's a lie. Literally, it's a lie. Metaphors are uncomfortable for us, though. What is he talking about? Vines, rocks, mountains leaping like rams, in the Psalms. I mean, the whole of Scripture is riddled in metaphor. But our education trains us not in metaphor, but in literal truth. We're all brought up for the facts. We must find the facts. Rationality. That's what's valued. I bet most of us spent our school days learning off information harvesting. Information, gathering the data. Poets and poetry, okay, sometime like God on the sidelines. No, so poets and poetry aren't going to get you anywhere. What are you going to do with your life? Be a poet? How are you going to feed your family? Our education, our journalistic age demands information, clean information, precise definition. Tell it as it is. What are you fooling around with, giving it these parables and metaphors and everything else? Mountains leaping and God's made of rock. But I tell you, if you don't get metaphor, then you're really never going to get the Scriptures at all. You're going to misunderstand so much. But they're not comfortable. We much prefer the precise, tidy, clear definition. But the truth is, some realities do not fit definition. They won't submit to clean explanations. They won't. Love, faith, God. So a metaphor helps us out. But it needs our imagination It needs our imagination, active, loose. I think a metaphor, it's, you know these lozenges you can take in your mouth and they dissolve slowly, and they, especially sparkly ones, you know the way they can create a fizzy. That's what a metaphor is like. They're like a lozenge that you leave in your mouth, and it stinks, and it explodes in your consciousness, and it brings us in. There are so many, and then there's all these layers of meaning that can happen. They're like a compressed story. It's like if you pushed it all together and then boom, it's spread out. And I want to do an experiment with you on this, and that involves the blackberry. I don't know who, I'm a great fan of Seamus Heaney and his poetry. Late August, given heavy rain and sun for a full week, the blackberries would ripen. At first just one, a glossy purple clot, red-green, hard as a knot. You ate that first one. Its flesh sweet like thickened wine. Summer's blood was in it, leaving a stain upon the tongue and a lust for picking. The red ones inked up and sent us out with milk cans and pea tins and jam pots round cornfields and potato drills and hay fields, until the tinkling bottom was covered with green ones, and on top big dark blobs burned like a plate of eyes. Our hands were peppered in thorn pricks, our palms sticky as bluebeards. What I want you to do for a moment is, I think the metaphor, summer's blood was in it. Just close your eyes for a moment and imagine that blackberry. Summer's blood was in it. What sparkle? Where does your head go when you think of summer's blood describing a blackberry? And I'm gone to hearts and liquid, and I'm sparkly, I'm all over the place. That compressed story explodes, and my reactions are personal. Your reactions will be yours. You'll have different ones to summer's blood, like thickened wine. Marvelous metaphors which sparkle and send us, and they're personal, our reaction. So what about our wheat grain? What about our wheat grain? Jesus doesn't want us to commit suicide, to die literally. So what needs to die? What needs to die inside us? Where does that wheat grain dying, yet putting out roots and putting out leaves? It puts down roots and it sends up leaves. Where does the wheat grain dying reverberate in your life? What needs to die in me? What needs to die in me? So that the metaphor is personal for each of you, for me. What needs to die? What do I need to let go of? So there's no formula for Christianity. If there was, it would all be summarized in lines. Do this, do this, do this, do that, do that. We're invited into a story of which this is part. And which the promise is glory. The promise is glory. Not glory of the red carpet. We're used to finding glory in sports stadiums, in film stars. That's the glory we hear most talked about. We don't hear about the glory, internal glory. No one is promoting internal glory, for goodness sake. It's all about image, external, glamour, glamour. Not beauty, not beauty. So, we are offered a way of life to become butterflies. Butterflies. That's the offer. But it does have cost. It does have cost. It asks us to abandon our narrow, cramped, flimsy identities, which we carefully put together and craft according to the cultural expectations. Holy living, whole, the sap still flowing, as the psalmist says, still full of sap, still green, is not a self-help project. I thought it was for a long time. I thought it was for the longest time. But the gospel message to us, it's not negative. All these words have got such very difficult connotations for us. Denying, crosses, they've all got these. We're packaged with metaphors in our heads that we can't get out about the cross and about denying, and they should all be positive, reshaped, because it is through the cross, through pain, suffering, that we will actually find life. We will not find it through possessions, through titles. We won't find the beauty of a butterfly if we remain caterpillars, if we remain caterpillars. Now, the gospel message, we're told, is a mystery, and it is a mystery, and there's a great deal of mystery. But it's not a total mystery. We do get hints and guesses as to what we are to do. We've all planted seeds. We've all seen them come up. At least I hope we have. Flowers and vegetables. And the seed does die in many ways. It gives itself up. It lets go of itself. So I become more by loosening my grip, letting go. Glory will be an internal, blazing life. The trouble is, we want to pick the fruit. We want to pick the fruit. We want to be the fruit. We don't want to be the seed put in the ground to die, to self. We've lost the plot a bit, and I have lost it myself. The self has become sovereign. God has been marginalized, and we are living lesser, smaller, cramped lives as a result. God is sovereign, Lord of all. And He, I believe, will lead us to life now, but it does come at a cost. At a cost, not money. That's what we think nowadays. We can buy anything we want. We should be able to buy anything. It will come at a cost. Suffering and pain are not the worst thing. Death is not the worst thing. The worst thing is not being capable of being present to life and living it to the full.